Up next, let's talk about Presto. Presto's a lot like Drill conceptually, but the more time I spend with it, it's a pretty impressive technology. It really does grow on you. It's a little bit of a pain to set up, but once you get it up and running, it's kind of amazing. So, like Drill, it can just connect to many different big data databases and data stores at once and issue queries across all of them. So it can connect to, MongoDB and Cassandra and Hive and wherever your data might live. If you have multiple data stores in your organization that contain huge amounts of data that are scaled horizontally on these different systems, Presto can provide a single point of access for issuing queries against that data no matter where it might live in your organization. And, like with Drill, it can actually issue queries across those different databases and join them together for more complex queries that draw from all of those different data stores. So it's not a database itself, but it's a layer between your SQL queries and your various data stores that you have distributed throughout your organization. And as with Drill, it offers the familiar SQL syntax, so odds are people in your organization already know SQL, and if you know SQL, you can use Presto. And it also exposes a JDBC driver, so like also with Drill, and Phoenix for that matter, you can connect existing applications that talk to SQL pretty easily through Presto to your entire data world internally, no matter how big and how complex it might be. It's optimized for analytical queries. So unlike Phoenix, it's not meant for lots of fast transactions. It's meant for people that are doing data analysis, okay, and data warehousing applications. So it's not meant for getting high transaction rates or being super quick in its latency. But once you give it a complex query, it can figure it out and execute it efficiently, but you should expect a response within seconds as opposed to microseconds or milliseconds, right? Now, the cool thing about Presto is that it was actually originally developed by Facebook, and it's kind of hard to imagine bigger data than what Facebook has to deal with, right? So that's a big plus in my book. If you know it's being used in the real world by a huge company like that, it's probably pretty well refined. And in addition to the JDBC database driver, it also has a command line interface that you can use to just issue queries directly against Presto to your world of data. Data lake is a term that keeps coming up lately. That just means a big pool of flat data stored on these distributed systems. And it also has a built-in connector for Tableau. So a lot of the data analyst world likes to use a tool called Tableau for, extracting meaning from big data. And using Presto, you can hook Tableau up to your entire big weird world of big data in your organization without much trouble. So why would you use Presto versus something else? Well, one reason you might use it instead of Drill is that it has a Cassandra connector. So I'm a fan of Cassandra. I think that's also a very good technology, and I'm a little bit biased because it has some of its roots at Amazon. It sort of originated from Amazon's Dynamo database internally and grew into something at Facebook. So if you do have Cassandra, well, you don't really have a choice because currently, as of this recording, Drill does not have a Cassandra connector that's maintained. So if you want to use Cassandra and you want to combine that data with other stuff in your organization, Presto is the way to go. And, if it's good enough for Facebook, it's probably good enough for you. So here's a quote from the Presto webpage. It says that Facebook is using it against 300 petabytes of data. Think about how huge that is. You can't even comprehend the size of that data, right? Over 1,000 Facebook's employees are using Presto daily. So they're telling you that this is not only being used for some little side project in Facebook, it is a core piece of their infrastructure that everybody is using to extract information from the data that they have. Running more than 30,000 queries per day over a petabyte each. Okay, so let those numbers sink in. This is massive data being used at big scale on big queries. And if it's good enough for them at this sort of a scale, I'd be very surprised if your requirements are bigger than that. Okay, so that's a huge plus in my book. Also, it's being used by Dropbox and Airbnb, and I'm sure it's being used by other organizations as well that we're not hearing about here, but it's pretty cool stuff. A couple of other cool quotes from their website that kind of describe the value of Presto. The whole idea is that it combines data from multiple sources, allowing for analytics across your entire organization. So again, if you're a big company where you have a bunch of different databases spread out throughout the company, big companies like Facebook or Amazon or anyone else, Google, they tend to have these self-contained teams that go off and store data however they want. And that's okay. Presto can tie all that together for you and still make it look like a unified pool of data, if you will, that you can query all together at once. And it breaks the false choice between having fast analytics using an expensive commercial solution or using a slow free solution that requires excessive hardware. Presto does just kind of sit on top of your existing hardware and data stores. And it kind of seems like the whole point of them building this was to avoid paying a lot of money for a commercial data warehousing solution. And when you're dealing with that sort of a scale, that's a smart thing to do. And it was actually very nice of Facebook to open source this and make it available to the world. There's a long list of things Presto can talk to on the back end. Like we talked about, it can connect to Cassandra. Cassandra is also a Facebook-sponsored project. It can also talk to Hive, MongoDB, and MySQL, as well as local data files, and even stuff that we haven't talked about yet. So Kafka is a very popular streaming data application. So if you have, data coming in real time, Presto can even consume that as well. PostgreSQL, another relational database like MySQL, that's pretty popular. Redis and Accumulo, other things we'll talk about later. So with that, let's just dive in and see how Presto works, get our hands dirty, and see that it's actually functional. We'll go and set up Presto on our Hortonworks sandbox environment. And we'll start by querying our ratings table from Movie Lens that's sitting in Hive using Presto. And then we'll go and turn Cassandra back on from our earlier lectures on Cassandra and use Presto to query the data that's in Cassandra. So we had our Movie Lens users table in there. And finally, we'll tie it all together by using Cassandra to execute a query that spans Cassandra and Hive to tie together that users data with the ratings data from Movie Lens that are living in two completely different data stores. So that can kind of show you kind of the power of Presto. So let's dive in and see how it works.